Unbelievable. I was getting ready to do the Yukon video at the end of the first half. Just, it was going to be basically saying how the hard schedule they played, non conference, is showing benefits now, and Yukon's on the right track. And who would you rather be right now? Yukon, who's played a tough schedule and now has easier competition to sort of further build their team and then face off versus South Carolina, or LSU, who's had a few tough games but not really played a hell of a lot and now going into their tough conference schedule. And I was probably going to make a case about how good UConn looked and how that's the way to go, because I always agree with playing a tough schedule. But then the whole story changed with 3 minutes left to go in the third quarter when Aubrey Griffin sustained a non contact injury to her left knee. I am going to speculate. If you don't like speculation, then turn off now. But I will talk about what I think the injury is and basically the impact for UConn and how they will go moving forward. So on the replay of the injury, you can see that she gets a good crossover her opponent and turns her around basically. I think Griffin loads up her left knee when she attempts to change directions. And for all the world, it definitely looks like it's an ACL injury. As her foot stops quickly and it seems like her leg sort of rotates, and then she recovers on defense and jumps off the leg. And I suspect when she was in the air, like she felt the clunk in her knee, like felt the unstableness of it and was like, oh, this is not right. You can see her grab for it as she goes into the air and then just goes down to the floor, unfortunately. The Yukon blog says that the Creighton doctors took a look at her knee and said that it was unstable. So for all the money, unfortunately, it does sound like ACL. The only other thing I could think of was initially I thought, oh, is that patella tendon? Because she was sort of grabbing up high, or sorry, down low on her knee. And I thought, oh, maybe she sort of semi tore it on the first move and then finished it off trying to jump through her leg like the final straw. But I don't think so. I think it was more she did it, didn't realize, much like you don't always have to be in agonizing pain when you first do your ACL. But I think when she tried to jump off on that leg, she felt a clunk and knew it wasn't right. Either way, if it was a tear to the patella tendon, she would be done for the season. That's like a 6-month injury versus ACL, which is 9 to 12 months. You could see Auriemma's disbelief on the sideline, and then in the post game, he's just like, he had no words for it. How this impacts UConn and their chances for this season, well, it's obviously big because she was the first one off the bench. She's that dynamic wing that can sort of change the game around. You were expecting to get 20 to 30 minutes from her a game and be that impact player off the bench. In some ways with Griffin, you never knew what you were going to get with her. Like sometimes she could have just be unbelievably aggressive and have an offensive game of her life when it's all going well. But one thing that you knew you were probably going to get was a very solid defensive performance, essentially. And really, she was a body that you really could not afford to lose. And it's such a shame because they were really starting to gel at UConn and play well at the right time. And you're like, oof, what could this team be? Could they get to the Final Four and have a hot streak with shooting? And how far could this team go? I think that was always a stretch just due to their front court depth. And this will further hinder that. I think what UConn is really looking for this year. I mean, their starting lineup is still intact. This obviously gives them less flexibility having Griffin in there as a wing option and the first one coming off the bench. But this year for UConn is really turned into like, I liken it to Apollo 13, the successful failure, being they got the astronauts back alive, but at the same time they failed to get to the moon. And that is what this season I think will probably be in my mind as it's a failure because UConn was obviously focused on going to the Final Four and winning a championship and just playing, finally getting behind all the injuries they had and showing everybody how dominant they could be with all of their parts fitting in place. And as Gino's already said, the team that he envisioned in his mind when they were in Europe, I mean, that team is dead and gone. It hasn't been confirmed yet, but you think Deschamps is the next piece to fall next, as it just seems very unlikely that she would play this season, in my opinion. So the successful part of this failure is basically you're playing the freshmen and they are playing well. So you are getting experience to Shade. You're getting experience to KK Arnold, and they are delivering. Now the next two, and part of that success trio is Gino is going to have to trust Cadence Samuels and give her more time. Her defense is obviously not in the class of Griffin, but in some ways she has the potential to give more, as she has the capability of, just with her shot, getting hot and dominating a game from the other end of the court. The other impact will be is you think this will force Gino to have to give Ice Brady more time. I think it's going against his instinct, as he doesn't feel like she's earned it to a certain degree, but he really has no other option. It's basically now Cadence and Ice Brady in terms of who his remaining options are on the table. In terms of building depth in a 7-man rotation, which they'll need going forward. The other question is, does he give DeBerry another shot? So I think if Griffin remained healthy, I don't think DeBerry was going to see the court again. Maybe she would have gotten some time versus South Carolina when they faced them, just to match up against Cardoso. But I think now maybe they will start to give her a few minutes just to have a backup plan. I mean, the scary thing with the lack of depth that UConn has in the front court, could you imagine if this injury was to Edwards? And that is really the nightmare scenario. If Edwards or Beckers goes down, then obviously UConn is just totally sunk. And Paige Beckers has really only made it one season injury-free. So that's, that would be the final shoe to drop on this if she gets an injury, hoping it doesn't happen, obviously, because she's really starting to hit her stride and play well. Prior to the game, I saw an Instagram post, and it had like Beckers and Edwards, and I think Mule was on there as well. There was one other, I can't remember. And it was like, excited for the game, but a lot's going on. And then somebody was like, oh my God, what's happening? Who's been injured and we don't know about? And then somebody was like, no. Somebody said, no, they're talking about the faces they were making, essentially, like a lot was going on in the picture. And somebody said, yeah, just always fear the worst, just based on what's happened in the last 2 seasons. And I think UConn fans just have PTSD if they hear, something's happened, or somebody's had a strain. You're always sort of feeling the worst as a UConn fan. Anyway, overall, just a real big bummer, as UConn was really starting to look good and really starting to gel. So this is a real shame that this has happened. But the bright side is that they continue to give freshmen more time and they keep on delivering. And I think that's the successful aspect that you're looking for this season to set UConn up for the future, is how they build and develop these freshmen throughout the rest of the year. Anyway, your comments, feedback, poison, it's always welcome. Thanks a lot for watching. Good night.